Hey, Trekkers! Welcome to another episode of Trek Tonight. Tonight we have special guest Joe Townsel with us, and we will be talking about the Elysian Kingdom. So rather than mess around here, let's get right to it and start the show. Boy, I gotta tell you, it is not my day today. I was telling the guys before I started the show that I was looking at my doing the re-edit of the opening title sequence, and normally I leave it right in my editor. And all of a sudden, I got in there around 6 o'clock, ready to just change up some titles, be ready for the program, and it was gone. So I had to let's try something here. Let's go and. We're going to try this take two. And here we go. Welcome to the show. Now that's how it's supposed to start. And I'm going to bring in my good buddy, as always, Leo Janicek. Leo, how are you?
I'm doing well. Live long and prosper, Chris.
Live long and prosper to you, my friend. And of course, our special guest tonight, Joe Townsel. Joe,
LAP, my friends,
looking as youthful as ever.
Oh, what a guy! What a guy! Thank you so much. Chris, I was going to say that we love our live TV, don't we?
Yes, we sure do, don't we? Oh, man, it's been that kind of a day. We had a terrible weather today. I don't know about what you guys had where you are, Leo, with her. It was rainy up in New York, and Joe out by you.
It was kind of
just hot, muggy here.
It was warm. Like yesterday, we had like temperatures in the 60s. It felt like sort of like the beginning of fall.
Right.
And it was a little overcast, and it sort of rained a little. I don't think it rained today. We may get some later, maybe some tomorrow, but it was sort of overcast, kind of sort of like not a spectacular weather day.
No, it's probably heading up north to you, because for those of you who don't know, I'm down in Delaware. Leo is up in New York. And Joe, where actually are you? I forget now.
Currently, I'm in Kingman, Arizona, which is about a half hour from Laughlin, Nevada.
Right. Nice.
Right. Did you ever see, Joe, the film Lost in America?
Absolutely.
Is that not a fantastic? Not only are you in Winnebago, but you're near Nevada, which is fantastic.
Yes, I'm living that dream.
At least you haven't lost your nest egg. That's all I've got.
Yes.
Yeah, I love that film. As horrific as it gets, I love that movie.
Oh, it's great.
Yeah, and at the time, I really fancied myself an ad man. So it was really? I'm like, oh man,
Yeah, the great Albert Brooks and Julie Haggerty, as I recall.
Fantastic, yeah.
What a great couple.
Great film. All right, guys. We have the Elysian Kingdom now. As I said, I did a little promo this week, and as I said, I imagined it would be one of those typical TOS or TNG costumed, take you out of reality kind of Q episodes, sort of, or like Shore Leave, where it's kind of goofy and fun. But this episode had a more serious note to it. Amidst all of the costumes and the silly swapping of character types and so on and so forth. In general, what did you What did you think, Joe? I'm going to ask you first as our guest.
Thank you. Well, as I said backstage, it remains probably my least favorite episode, and I want to stress again that I don't do best and worst because it's all subjective. Just my least favorite, which means that they're all been great. I mean, there hasn't been a dud in the bunch for me, but it was elevated. And I know we're going to get there. It was elevated beyond basically the holodeck story with no holodeck at the end. That's when we got to the meat of it and the revelation. I think that really raised the bar for this episode quite a bit. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yeah. How about you, Leo?
I enjoyed it too. It's interesting because it's always fun for the audience, but I think especially for the actors because, first of all, full spoilers for this episode. If you're watching this and haven't watched the episode, we're going to spoil it for you.
Yeah.
Just in
that
case.
Is true.
So go watch the episode first. Come on.
Yeah, please watch it. But everybody sort of got to play against type in this episode, just about. Right. And I know the actors are like they want to perfect their characters, and they're like, but sometimes it's fun to be like play something different. It's like they get to play around. There was a whimsical element to it, but there was also and we'll get to that towards the end because I'm not going to spoil the end just yet.
Right.
It had a very deep emotional core to it, and this is centered around Dr. Mbenga's daughter. As we've seen in earlier episodes, she has this terrible disease, and he keeps her in the buffer, brings her briefly to examine her and read to her, which is sort of the big crux of this episode, this story he's been reading to her, this children's book. So it cherry picks certain elements from both TOS and TNG, but it also makes it a completely new story in a way that we haven't seen before. So I thought they did an excellent job.
Great.
And Craig Robinson says, evening gents, fine weather in Colchester, England today.
Very nice. Very
brilliant.
Good to see you. Yes, marvelous. Good to see you, Craig. And also, we have Keith, our good buddy Keith, who I enjoyed playing a wonderful role-playing game last night with. Leo and I both did that. It was a Star Trek Adventures game. We had a lot of fun with Keith. And you just finished the episode, and he says he's still processing the ending.
Yes. It is a lot to process. So I quite enjoyed it. I thought that the resolution of it felt very much like it elevated it in a way that it could have easily just been like it was a Cupid with the Robin Hood and Vash and Picard and I am not a merry man and so
one of my favorite.
It's which is a delight. I love that episode. I mean, one because I'm a big fan of Vash. I always wish there was more of her on the show. This is a Genesec tidbit. Did you know that she and Patrick Stewart were an item for a while?
I did not.
I was not aware of this.
I only recently became aware of this, and you can hardly blame, I guess, either of them because, Patrick Stewart, a very charismatic man, and she is a gorgeous woman. So, who can blame them?
Why not?
Not I. Anyway, but like I said, this felt like it had a stronger emotional core to it.
Yeah.
And it is the events that lead up to this have been set up in previous episodes. So.
Right. Yeah, and nicely. I mean, I didn't expect the more serious tone which is basically the subtext or the basis for the thing.
Yeah.
And I hadn't really considered because you have seen Dr. Mbenga read this book to his daughter before in previous episodes.
Yeah.
So it was interesting to see them draw on that as basically the basis for an entire plot, which is cool.
Speaking of drawing, wasn't it convenient that all the major characters in the storybook illustrations resembled the crew?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They knew exactly who to pick to play those roles.
to set it up is, and Benga is like struggling with trying to, help his daughter, and she's not getting any better, and he's just things are not working, and he's kind of like at the end of his rope, and even number one's like, listen, you need to rest, and he's like, no, I'm fine. She's like, well, I'm going to make it an order because, listen, I know you've got a lot of responsibilities as a dad, but you also are the chief medical officer on the ship, so just go to your quarters, get some rest in, and there's nothing pressing. Everything will wait tomorrow.
Yeah.
And then they've been investigating this nebula, and on the bridge you see Pike. He's like, I could get used to this because that concludes the scan of this nebula. He's like, this is great. This is, nice. Nobody's shooting at us. There's no drama. And Spock is like, Captain, you frequently told me that there's a human superstition that you should not state that everything is going well because then something will go badly.
Right.
And he's like, yeah, I'm sure we'll be fine. So they were like, all right, let's get out of this nebula. We've got everything we need. And then, Ortega's like, all right, you're going to say it? He goes, punch it. And she hits the button and nothing happened. He's like,
I liked that little bit where she said, are you going to say the thing?
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, yeah, hit it.
Yeah.
Hitting it.
I do love their relationship.
Yeah, I do too. Yeah, it's great.
And she pressed the button, nothing happened. He's like, did you not hear me? And she's like, no, I did. It didn't work. And they were theorizing whether, and they called he calls Hemmer, and his return of Hemmer, who's been a bit absent.
Yeah, which is great.
So do we still have a warp core down there? He's like, yes, Captain. There's everything's working. They were like, everything's working fine, but for some reason, we can't do this. And Spock said, well, we may not be able to make a stable warp bubble because of some weird interference from the nebula. And I was like, well, let's go out with impulse, and when we get clear, we'll do that.
Right.
And they start to do that, and then the whole ship lurches. Ortega's like knocks herself out, like some blood is going. And
wasn't it nice of her to stand up so she could fall really hard?
Yeah,
and then get up there.
Yeah, there's inertial dampeners did not work right then. So they call Mbenga to the bridge, and he's still kind of exhausted. He goes up, and you can see he's tired.
Right.
And he's going up, and he comes up out of the bridge, and suddenly it's more of a throne room. There are all these banners hanging, and he's dressed in robes and a crown. Hemmer, 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 finally, says Keith Jacobson. And everybody's dressed in sort of medieval, sort of Ren Fair garb. And Pike is there with the worst haircut you could imagine.
Yeah, I know. I love it. I love it.
Up on the sides, and it's like it's not his normal, hair loaf, which has captivated viewing audience.
Captivated the internet. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And he's like, "Oh, the king! Everybody bow!" And and then of course Doug Mbenga is like, "What the hell?"
Yeah.
But he also flashes to a page of the book when he sees Pike, which is something that will go through the course of this book as he runs into the crew.
Sure.
Spoiler: it seems like they are reenacting the story from his daughter's book.
Yeah. Now, wasn't it a missed opportunity though that we didn't get to see Sam Kirk as as the court jester in that scene?
I think that
yeah, and I think that our good friend Diana would have suggested he be the court jester as well.
Yeah.
What did she call him a couple episodes ago?
I think
A goober. That's right, a goober. Yeah.
He would have made an excellent court jester. It is a missed opportunity, but there was a lot going on here, so
yeah,
maybe they'll have it in the deleted scene.
Yeah.
And also to flash back a little bit to the beginning when he's reading the story to her, and it's the end of the story, and it's like things are dire for the characters in the story, and she's like, I don't like this part. She says, well, you just asked me to read it. And she says, well, yeah, but it's always sad. It's like I'm always said that this character and this character to come and help. And she's like, and he's like, well, someday you'll be able to write your own stories, and you can write it and make it however you want.
Right.
And she said, well, I have to get better first. He's like, yeah, that's true. And, which of course for him is like another knife in the heart because he's, trying to balance all this stuff. So now he is talking to everybody, and they're like, what's going on? And he says, I'm going to talk to the computer, and Pike is like, what does he mean? What is the computer? And Ortegas, who's now like his chief of like the captain of the guard,
Right.
She's like, well, obviously he means the Oracle.
Yes.
And she and Pike have this very snippy relationship, or their characters in this book.
Right.
Because Pike's character is a very conniving, sort of scheming, cowardly character, and she's very much like, my blade thirsts for blood, and so he's like, I'm going down to the sick bay. He said, do we need to commandeer a ship for this? And he's like, no. I'll be fine. So he goes down, and he's walking through holes, and there's like vines growing, and there are like torches, and people are like,
loved the way the corridors in the ship were redesigned, and with all the flora and fauna and the torches and the and it was really interesting too when you look at the bridge.
Yeah.
Because the Khan was the throne.
Yeah.
Right.
And yet they were still like, Mabenga was still able to access the computer, the Oracle. They referred to it as, but all the draperies around it was just really, the set design was very cool, because it wasn't, say, like in a Q episode where they just would have been transported to
a castle.
A castle.
Yes.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, Sherwood Forest,
Yeah. This was just basically decorating, which is why in the beginning, I think Mabenga thinks they're all putting him on.
Yeah. He's like, what is this? He looks at Ortega and says, was this your idea?
Yeah.
And everybody is playing it super straight and not at all, so he goes down to sick bay. He also has a couple of presumable crew members or like clean people, they're like scullery maids or whatever in the corridors. They're like, my liege.
Yeah.
And he goes into sick bay, and it looks like there's cauldrons, and there's all sorts of plants, and there's Nurse Chapel, who's sort of like a hedge witch, sort of, gypsy kind of,
Oh man, did she look great? Of course, she always looks great.
Oh yeah,
of course.
Yeah.
I loved her costume. I thought it was fantastic.
And he gets one of the fine burgers. He's like scanning himself, and she's like, "Oh, is that a healing stone?"
Yeah.
And he scans her, and you have elevated dopamine levels, and she's like, "I see." And then Ortegas comes in with Laan, who is a princess from the book, and Laan, who is normally like very much like, these are the rules, like very severe character, shows up in the flounciest of space princess gowns, with like a little like purse dog who is also wearing this like bejeweled cape. And she
her actual dog in real life, by the way.
Yes, that is
Is
her
it really?
real dog.
Yes.
Oh, how cool! How cool!
And very very almost like cartoonishly feminine in her affect. And they're all talking about the Mercury Stone, which is supposed to be this great weapon that he has.
Right.
And he said, well, you have this, you can use it, because there's Queen Nev, who we've not met yet. She took over my kingdom, my forest, and now you must help me. And he's like, yes, well, you know where it is. He's like, yes, I do. In that way, because he clearly doesn't, but everybody's buying it.
Right.
And it is, and then they see, I believe, if I'm getting this right, Hemmer is being dragged away by the Crimson Guard, one of whom was and I wrote her name down because we haven't said that she is the navigator who normally
Right.
sits.
Yeah, we've seen her before. Yeah.
But
They gave her a nice scar on her face.
Yes.
Well, we saw at the beginning of the episode, in
Yes.
the home station. So,
all right. Well, let's hold it up there.
Anna Mitchell.
Yeah, let's hold it up right there. So, any notes then, or thoughts on where we are so far? Joe, what do you think?
well, a couple of thoughts I had at this point. Now, this is definitely kind of an apples and oranges in terms of quality. I was reminded of two things. The transformation of the Enterprise to me was a little reminiscent, but to better effect here. Looking back on the TNG episode Mask,
Yes.
when Data's in the whole it becomes like this, that was not quite as effective as it was here, but it did bring it to mind. And the one thing that I was starting to occur to me at this point as well is that I think one weakness of the approach in this, we got to see the bridge officers in their usual selves before the change.
Yeah. Right.
The rest of them, no. So, I mean, just off chance, if this is your first episode, you're going, who are these people really? I mean, maybe an establishing shot or two of the other characters in a similar fashion might have been a little bit in order here, because we didn't get to see any of them afterwards, as far as returning to normal.
Right.
So that's kind of where I was at this point mentally, and I'm thinking, and again, I'm also in that mindset of, okay, well, this is a fun romp. Let's see where it goes.
Right.
It is. It's interesting because I thinking about when, like, both Chris and I'm gonna guess Joe, like, watching TOS for the original. I watched it in syndication, and it was in whatever order UPX cared to air it in.
Right.
Which is, as a result, I saw Who Mourns for Adonais like more times than I cared to. Not that it's not a good episode, but it's like there are other episodes I wanted to see more. Like I would want to see Trouble with Tribbles or Mirror Mirror,
right,
or The Mercy or something like anything with Klingon to Romulans. I was very excited about. But that Apollo episode kept popping up. I don't know why. It's like they just were like, some guy reached back and just pulled the tape off the shelf.
Yeah.
Right.
Just made sure it was Star Trek and threw it in.
Right.
But TV viewing today is different. It seems it's not impossible that this might be somebody's first episode of the show, but it's unlikely. I feel, because it's streaming, and let's be honest. There's some good stuff on Paramount Plus, but the real draw is Star Trek. That is their,
right,
prize-winning, horse in this stable.
Well, and it is true, to your point, Leo, that if you go, let's say you've never watched Strange New Worlds, and you think, yeah, I'm going to give that a try. You open it up on, on the streaming platform for Paramount and Paramount Plus, and you're going to see the orders listed in order.
Yeah.
So you're certainly not going to jump to episode 7 if you haven't watched 1, 2, and 3. So
I think it was more of an issue. I forgot to make the comparison once I introduced it. Because let's face it, Naked Now, TNG, was a horrible episode.
Oof.
It was the first regular episode after the pilot.
Yeah.
And said, who are these silly people? Because if you just happen to miss the pilot, you're
right,
bewildered. That's not quite as prevalent here.
No.
It just struck me that maybe we could have used a little bit of a scene with the others, to kind of take us to where they went.
I wish the episode was 2 hours long and that there were 20 of them a season, but that is my inherent greed for more Star Trek. But like I said, Sam Kirk as a jester, that would have been fucking
yes.
yeah.
But
my prediction is we probably won't get more episodes as much as I would like to see. As I mentioned earlier, maybe as many as 15 or 16. But I wouldn't be surprised if eventually we got longer episodes.
Maybe. It's interesting. That is the standard of an hour. It looks like both discovering this, just to take a step back, they are structured like a traditional TV show with breaks and commercials. And the pacing is the pacing generally of a network TV show.
Right.
Whereas there's certain shows, hour-long shows that are streamed that are just an hour or thereabouts. So I think CBS is keeping these in their back pocket in case they really like, hey, we're gonna they showed the first season of Discovery. I think it was about a year ago, was it, on CBS?
I think that after season 1 ran streaming, then the following season but they only did that once.
I think they were trying to set up like a hardback paperback method.
Yeah, something like that. But I think it's always in their back pocket that they'll have them to do on broadcast TV. Because if you're doing a streaming show, there's unless you're planning on eventually putting it on network TV with commercials, there's no benefit to breaking it up in an old school TV format.
Right.
So, but they
Now,
are
I'm not sure what Craig's talking about here. Maybe you guys get this. Hemmer's big brain can't even stand up against Boltzmann's big brain.
Well, that's as we find out later, that Boltzmann's brain it's sort of more of a thought exercise. The idea that a consciousness could come into being like spontaneously. And was there any doubts, says Keith?
That was primarily the setup for his psychic
because
vulnerability as far as being assumed.
But
that does bring us to the point where M'Benga realizes as they're dragging him away that he also is aware that they're in a storybook.
Yeah, because he's like, I'll have you court-martialed. They were like, shut up, wizard. And he's like, I didn't put these robes on. They just like, I'm the chief engineer. And they were like, only proof of your wizardry, wizard. And they try to get them to stand down. M'Benga starts using like knowledge from the book, like the accords of the forest, forbid you from, interfering in this area. And the queen says, Queen Knave, rejects the accords of the forest, and soon this will all be her, kingdom, and blah blah blah. They go off, and he's like, somebody help me. Hemmer's very clearly not in on the joke,
right?
So,
and I actually thought this was a wonderful episode for Hemmer because, as you see, as you get into the episode, and he and M'Benga start working together, which is an interesting pairing because. How often do you see the Doctor? And we did in TOS every now and then. McCoy would get thrust into having to help.
Now
Scotty, I'm a doctor, not a But he gets to throw himself into the role, which is really fun.
It is. He does. He gets a lot of funny lines, and so they're planning like, well, we have to rescue this wizard, Kester, and. So they have this map spread out, and they're like in the conference room, and it's a map of the Enterprise. And I didn't notice it until the second viewing because I watched it twice.
Yeah,
it's the outline of the Enterprise, but it's like a D&D sort of world map. Like there's different colors and like paths and like trees and mountains and so on. And it's only the briefest of views, and I haven't found an image of it online. But I kind of want that as a print. I think that would be a great thing to hang on your wall.
Oh,
very nice touch. Yeah,
it was such a nice little throwaway touch.
I'm sure somebody will put that out somewhere eventually.
I'm sure.
Yeah, and I loved all the little sort of like Game of Thrones pieces.
Yes,
that they were putting around, and he's in the dungeon, and he's this and that. Yeah, I thought that was cool.
And they're deciding like, well, we have to rescue the wizard, and Pike was like, well, it's sad, but maybe we should just, forget about him. And, Ortegas is like, accusing him of cowardice. And she's like, what was the name of her sword? It was like Star.
Right. That's Starfire or something like that.
Starblade. If any of our viewers are watching, remember it better. But it was like Star something. And like Pike is like, that's a stupid name for a sword. He's like, you're a stupid, And finally, they're like
Starfall, I believe. Leo.
Starfall, which is actually a very cool name for a sword.
Exactly.
Disagree with Sir Roth. Yes, those membranes are hypothetical disembodied entities with self-awareness, like most people in the late '80s at a Grateful Dead concert.
Yeah.
Possibly. I can't back that up in any real evidence.
Of course not.
Ask Rob.
That's Rob. Yeah.
Yeah.
So King's going to go with his cowardly knight and his brave knight, and the princess is like, well, what should I do? She's like, well, what should you should leave your dog here, and you should stay here and protect your dog. So, oh, that's wonderful. And if you should fall, I will sing a song. And earlier, she's like, I can't sing in the second episode, I believe it was.
Right.
Well,
right. Yeah.
She actually has some good pipes on her.
Yeah.
That was completely dubbed.
Yeah.
I mean, she does a very sort of like, sort of Disney princess, like high-pitched warble, but it's not off-key and it's not terrible. It's like maybe not something you'd want to listen to.
Yeah.
On
a regular
basis, but she totally she leans into it, and it's terrific.
Yeah.
So they're setting off, and as they go through the corridors, and they were like, and then Spock, who is now the wizard Pollux, the dark half to the light half of Castor is embodied by Hemmer.
Oh, I loved his look with the long,
Yeah, and he's this
almost snake-like hair and the
like with the long hair and the staff and the dark clothes.
He's doing his Elnor. That's what's
exactly
going on.
yeah, basically, yeah.
And they're like, if you wish to go to Queen Nev's kingdom, you will have to go through the swamp. Was it the swamp of certain?
Yeah, I forget.
Swamp of certain doom. Along those lines.
Spike says, "Well, that's a very bad swamp."
Yeah.
There's so many of these little throwaway lines that were just a delight.
Yeah.
And you do get to see Anson Mount, trot out his comedy chops in this episode.
Yeah.
And so, because Mbenga knows that Castor and Pollux are brothers, and he says, "Well, why should I help you?" He says, "Well, we're here to help your brother." He says,
right.
Who told you that? And the other two are like, "I did not know that. That is a surprise to me." And he says, "I read it in a book," which is a great, both a great joke and a great, truth. And so Spock, Wizard Spock, agrees to help them. So there's a way, but it's a long, dark way, and we see up a very tall Jeffries tube, and he says, "Follow me. This way you can avoid the swamp and come into a kingdom." And
I speaking of which, I really like the new Jeffries tube.
I do too.
For this show, because it very much holds on to the look of the TOS Jeffries tube.
Yeah.
But it's got a slightly different, and I like the fact that it has rungs. I don't know why I just noticed that this week. It has
well, it also looks functional. It doesn't look like a hole in the wall.
Yeah.
I mean, those old Jeffries tubes, they had those very shallow steps, which looked like a bad way to climb up to have to do delicate work.
Right.
But yeah, they don't let because there was no grip on it. There was no like rubber on the top where you were like, well, you won't slip.
Yeah.
Those patent leather boots they wore on the old show probably weren't like super.
Well, it was spacey.
It was spacey. It was. I can't argue with that logic.
Modern and spacey. Yeah.
So they're off to Queen Nave, who we finally meet, who is played by Uhura,
which was wonderful.
She has.
I love those metallic nails.
Yes. She has one of the best costumes in this episode. She has
absolutely.
Like these elaborate sort of shoulder pads with
spikes,
ice crystals off of her, and the crown which matched them, and it's great.
She's sitting on a throne, and she has her guard in their cot, and she's like, give me the mercury stone,
right.
And he's like, it could be anywhere, and they're like, we'll put you in the dungeon. Our torturers are very good at enjoy their job. They're very thorough. They look everywhere. And then they're thrown in the dungeon, which turns out to be the transporter pad with bars across it.
Yeah, no, that was an interesting. Yeah, I want to stop there because that was a really interesting choice. Why? Like, they could have put them in the brig.
Yeah.
So why did they pick that? And also, when did the transporter have sort of a side corridor that you walked around to get at? Like, what was that?
We've seen that earlier, but they don't really draw attention to it.
Okay.
The transporter room is much more expansive than the original shows was.
Well, getting all excited for the callbacks to TOS, I said, hey, you know what? Maybe some of these are getting, some of these tropes, they need to move on beyond it. But that was when I was, dungeon, just like in the old show. Are they going to be chained up to the walls and stuff? Yeah, and it was just a transporter pad. Dang it.
Well, the whole thing felt like somebody didn't have a clear picture of it in their mind. And we'll find out why later on. Yeah. But now the Doctor and Hemmer can finally talk about, because they're the only ones who still know what's going on.
Right. And but just to wrap that, I kept thinking to myself, well, the solution to them escaping is to somehow or other beam out of there. I mean, they were being imprisoned in something that literally transports you.
That occurred to me too.
And I thought, what an odd choice.
It wasn't,
but it makes sense, Chris, when they use the transporter later to ship them off to
yeah.
the
Did
cargo.
you get to use the transporter towards the
It
end?
would have been a little repetitive if they didn't done it both the same way both times.
Yeah.
Presumably, maybe they tried to activate it. We didn't see, I don't know if you can, standing on the transporter pad, whether you can order the transporter to beam you out or whether you need somebody to operate it.
Right. Well, probably you do. I mean, especially in that era.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Right.
it,
Just like an odd choice.
it was slightly odd, but it was kind of a fun open space for them, like with the bars in front of them. So it was like, they could have little private conversations, sort of.
Mm-hmm.
And Hemmer reveals like that when they were trying to get out of the nebula, he felt like a presence. Is about my telepathic training allowed me to block it. And then everything sort of started going crazy, and the doctor explains like, well, this is from a children's book that I read for my daughter, and Hemmer is of course a little confused because he doesn't know about the daughters. It's
Right.
a long story. They're all trying to figure out how to get out, and Hemmer also describes the feeling is like if somebody's trying to squeeze his brains out of his nose. And then Ortega says, yes, I once killed a man just like that.
That was awesome.
And they do a great cutaway to Pike, who's like horrified.
Yeah.
But not in a way like a moralistic, in a kind of like an ew way.
Yeah.
He's a bit of a fancy man.
Yeah.
And so Hemmer's like, well, I'm a wizard, and he pulls out like he has like some sort of gizmo with him, which turns out to have a laser function to it. He says, I'm going to conjure us out of this cell. Is it turn your eyes or you'll hurt your eyes? Well, what about you? He says, I'm a wizard. And then he whispers to Mbenga, says, what should I say? He goes, say abracadabra. He goes, abracadabra. I like that. So he like cuts through the bolt of the cell, and they escape. And he also says, I will be using the magic of science.
I love that line.
Which was wonderful. And Ortega says when they're
leaving. Yeah, we had seen him say that line.
Yeah.
Weeks ago in the teaser trailer.
Yeah.
So I was waiting for that to come up. Once I knew what this episode was going to be about, I thought, well, that's where that great line is going to show up.
And it was true. And Ortega, as they leave, she was like, I like this magic of science.
Yes,
it's pretty cool.
It's pretty cool. Yeah.
I'm glad we got to see Hemmer, not enjoying it, but a little bit more animated, a little bit less of a cranky guy.
To get into the spirit of things.
Exactly.
Oh, he definitely gets into the spirit of it. I almost say he did enjoy it, Joe. I mean, there was part of it that I think he got off on being able to do something light and fun and yet still be doing what he does.
Yeah.
Which was neat,
So I'm trying to remember because they're going to head towards engineering. That is their goal.
And interesting, when you get to engineering, get to engineering, it's the only place I think I've seen on the ship that was not altered at all.
No.
There's
no trees, there's no torches, there's no candles, nothing. It's just engineering.
Yeah. So they get to engineering. Also, like her castigates her Crimson Guard. Like, you're lucky your queen is in a generous mood, or heads would be rolling.
Yeah.
And she tests Spock with finding out what happened to these prisoners. And they're down in engineering, and they realize, no, it's before that they get engineering. Now I'm getting alternate because there's a lot of jumping around the ship. They have a fight in the corridor at a certain point. The Crimson Guard come down to assault them, and
we saw that Ortega's could be a pretty badass as long as she gets attacked by one guy at a time.
Well, that's the way these sort of stories work.
That's the way it goes.
Yeah, because the head of the Crimson Guard is like, you're unarmed, and one of her guards comes in and swings a sword, and she like punches him out and takes the sword. She's like, now I am armed, and she has a very like dashing sword fight in the corridor.
Got skills.
She's got skills.
Oh, I thought it was wonderful getting to see her play, the sort of go to the cross gender and play the sort of swashbuckling male character.
She's very D'Artagnan-esque.
See, now Craig says there were tiki torches in engineering, and that's it. I don't remember seeing that. But
He's right. There were a couple off to the side.
Yeah. So it is just then that the Huntress, another character from the book, is embodied by number 1, shows up, shoots some arrows at the guards, and they all flee. And so, and apparently, she and Ortega's characters, they'd be like, the head says, "I haven't seen you in a while." She's like, "Well, you couldn't send a raven?" She says, "Well, I've been busy." We'd be like, "Well, I just saved your life. I think that's worth something," And they're kind of bickering, and they're like, "Maybe we should get going." So they head to engineering, and and Hemmer reveals that he thinks that this is. Let me check my notes to get the right name. This is a Boltzmann brain, which, as we discussed before, is more of a thought experiment. The idea that a fully conscious sentience could evolve out of nothing, and it's not really scientifically accurate. It's more of a thought experiment, but I think it's a cool thing to drop in.
It is, and it's also an important moment in the plot, because somewhere in here is where M'Bengus, knowing the book, and hearing this familiar relationship between the Huntress and Ortega's character, and he realizes, wait a minute, they never even meet in the book. And so now he realizes the story is changing, and it's not as dedicated, and it's something that his daughter wanted.
Yeah, she's like,
exactly. She wanted, there were things about the story she didn't like, and she wanted them to be different. And he thinks to himself, once Hammer mentions this entity, and I think it's in there somewhere. He says, well, that there's sort of a logic to that, because she wanted the story to change, and these two should not be friends.
Yeah, because they also said, Hammer said, well, clearly this entity is reading this information from you, since you're the one who knows it.
Right.
But he said, but it's different. And he's like, oh. So they rush to sickbay, and they see that she's no longer in the buffer, and she'd been beamed out earlier that day, and they don't know where she is. And Spock is lurking around the corner, which also has some vines, because medieval stuff. And he's like, aha, this, that she is the Mercury Stone. And he dashes off to tell her.
Spock made a good lurker.
He did. And they're trying to figure out, like, where is she? And he's like, they can't find her. And they're in the sick bay. Now Spock then tells Uhura or Queen Nave, saying, that it's a child, and how do we find it? And he says, well, I think I have a plan, my lady, or something to that effect. And so they're in the sick bay, and they're trying to figure out where she is, and he's, and M'Bengus is becoming more and more frustrated. Not only is he's worried about his daughter's health, because she can't be out of the buffer that long, because he's old, but also, where is she? And he can't find it. And so Hemmer, who's picked up a communicator, which has been lying on amongst the beakers and urns and potions on the tables, and he said, well, maybe we're approaching it the wrong way. Where do you think she would want to go? And earlier she said, I want to see your quarters.
Right.
So they dash off to her quarters, and we encounter Sir Roth, a.k.a. Pike, and who was like talking to them, who had run off during the fight earlier. And also we found that he is missing from the scene, is like he basically pledges his loyalty to Queen Maeve. And he betrayed, he holds a knife to the king's throat just before he's supposed to go into his quarters. And then the queen shows up with her lackeys, her Crimson Guard. And Hemmer, who is like, oh, if you do not do it, I will use my magics on you. I will send you to the Event Horizon. It's a dark place full of monsters and things. He's like he's game. He's maybe not the best improviser. He's sort of
Right.
But I will use all my wizard powers of wizardry, and
Who is it? Who keeps feeding him lines? It's Mabenga, right?
sort of. He's like, well,
You tried it first.
Yeah,
and
first.
like,
Yeah.
he's trying to do it, and Spock is like, there's no such place, my queen. He's lying to you, because or Queen Maeve is kind of like, oh, I don't want to mess with this wizard.
Yeah.
And so they're all like, what are they going to do? So he starts like gesturing, like very weird and awkward sort of, but they all like, or everybody's like a little back, and then he takes his communicator and he has them beamed into Cargo Bay 12.
Right.
Yeah, I like when he's doing the gestures, and at one point, I think it was Mabenga, said something to him, and he goes,
yeah.
Continues.
So he does. So he's like, all right, now he can go into the room. And he goes into the room, and there is his daughter. She's just like a princess.
And adorable, as always. That little girl is just so cute.
She is. She's
and
adorable.
The costume was fantastic on her. The way they did her hair up in very elaborate thing.
She's also a good actress. Again,
yes,
you could give it for Stranger Worlds. The kid actors they've cast have been terrific.
They've been spot on. I mean, not a
clunker in
the bunch. Nope.
Right.
And he's talking with her, and she's, well, my friend. And you find out she's become friends with this entity,
right?
The Boltzmann brain in the nebula. And he scans her, finds out that she's free of, her space leukemia. And being glib, but I don't remember. It's only because I don't remember the name of the specific.
No, I don't remember it either. But
But she has a very serious disease, and he's like relieved, and he's just so happy to see her. And then they were like trying to find his will. She's like, she said I could play as long as I want, but he said, yeah, but this is bad for my friends. And then Hemmer comes in. He says, well, maybe I can facilitate a conversation.
Yeah, maybe the entity can speak through me.
Yeah, and
first wants to talk to it, right?
Yeah, and at first she said, "Well, that's not really how it works." And then Hemmer offers himself. He said, "Try to be gentle. You can use me to talk to." And she says, "Well, I'll ask." And she's like, "Would you mind talking with us if it's not too much trouble?" And then Hemmer becomes the conduit for this entity.
Then he says, "Be gentle."
Be gentle.
Yes.
Yeah. And they find out that this entity sensed her. You had her trapped in the machine, and because she was lonely, and the entity was lonely.
Well, and the entity perceived of her being in the buffer as her being imprisoned there, as opposed to being put in stasis to keep her alive. Yeah.
So they're explaining, and he's like, "Listen, this is bad. I can't." Comes down to they're like, well, you can either pick your daughter or the ship. If I leave, she's gonna get sick and die again. And it's like heartbreaking for him. And he's like, how can asking a father to choose between those two things.
Right.
And he goes, is there no other way? She says, well, there is one other way. She stays with me.
Right.
And you guys leave. And he's well, but he says like it's only
and none of these are great choices.
None of these are great.
As a dad, none of them are great choices.
Oh, not for Mabenga at all.
No, she's like, well, it's only her body that's ill. Her spirit is fine.
Right.
And Benga, in a very, I would say, in a light way, says, well, what do you want? Because she's like, I'll go back in the buffer if you want, Dad. Like, she loves her father. And he's like, well, what do you want to do? I can't make this choice for you.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, well, I'd like to stay with the entity. And it's like, and it breaks his heart.
Of course.
He also knows that this is the only future she has, that she's getting that, he can't keep her in the buffer forever. And he's no closer to finding a cure. Like you saw him.
But hang just a minute. Oh. In the episode with the first citizen, doesn't the doctor say that he can show him a process that will
It's the beginning.
prolong her life? It won't cure her, but it will give Dr. Mabenga more time.
Well, what he said was this is not the cure,
Right.
but it's the first step towards finding the cure.
But I also thought it was supposed to slow the degradation of her body.
I didn't get that impression, but I would have to go back and watch it.
Yeah.
My impression was like I'm not going to give you the answers, but I'm going to give you the tools to find the answers.
Right.
Which is, as anybody who's trying to work through some difficult homework isn't as helpful as it sounds. So it is, but he knows that she's getting worse and her time is short,
Mm-hmm.
and he also, like, she's isolated and lonely. Because she's a kid, she should be with
Right. Yeah, running around. Well, you see her running around with the little boy from that episode.
Yeah, it's like
and they're having a good time.
Yeah. It's ironic that they're both somewhat doomed.
Right.
Now looking back at it.
Right.
But but ultimately she's a poor little girl trapped in a hospital bed.
Yeah. Which is something that I think that people can relate to.
Absolutely.
Now. Yeah. So he agrees, and he explains how in the book, like the Mercury Stone was using. Remember how the Mercury Stone, the king, it made him happy, but he realized that it had a soul, and if he kept it with him, it would destroy it. So he lets it go. So even though he would never be happy again.
Right.
Now I'm getting choked up because that's fucking heartbreaking.
Oh yeah.
Heartbreaking.
Hey, Leo, listen. I wept through the end of that episode. So don't,
Yeah.
I'm sitting there thinking to myself, oh my God.
Well, we don't
How am I
want
gonna
to
do
be
this
McCoy
tonight?
asking Spock, do you have ice water in your veins? Of course we were all moved by that.
Yeah.
I teared up.
Right.
Sure.
Yeah.
Right.
So she, the entity releases Hemmer, and like she gets engulfed in like this sort of like cloud of sparkle. She's like, "Oh, it tickles, Daddy."
Right.
And she disappears, and he's just like, broken. And then like within a few moments, she comes back, but now she's an adult, and she's
Right.
like, "Thank you for giving me the chance. I wish I could tell you everything I've seen, everything I've done." And he's just like, Sammy's just like, "You just left a moment." So, well, it was moments for you, but it was like years for me.
Yeah, that was cool.
It was cool.
Yeah.
And, she's like, thanks him for letting her have that opportunity. Like, he basically allowed her to grow up. And, she also, she says, well, she calls the entity Deborah, and which was her mother's name.
Right.
Right.
As we find out.
Right.
Like,
And
he, like her, look at right in the heart. It's fucking.
I do have a theory about that part of it when she came back. Might be one of my outlandish theories that don't pan out, but what does this remind you of? "Quote unquote, time has no meaning here." Could this be the origin of the Nexus?
I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
That's a very interesting thought.
Thank you. I thought it occurred to me. I says, "Wow," because it occurs to me. I don't think we've seen the last of his daughter. I think he might get visits from her at various stages of her life.
She does say that there's some indication.
I know that we'll see each other again.
Right.
Which Craig says, I cried like a Cubs fan during most of their games.
Craig, you're going to get us letters. With
That's big.
I'm telling you.
Well, he's not wrong.
The Cubs win the World Series.
Well, they did. Which was I was delighted. You always listen, if the Yankees aren't in it or the Mets, I've got no skin in that game unless the Red Sox are playing, in which case I don't care. I hope that other team wins. Yeah. Come at me, Boston. Anyway, so it's this heartbreaking moment, but it also it's a salve for him because he knows that she's happy,
right?
And she's living a life, not the life he would have wanted for her, but a life,
right?
And then he's back in his normal outfit, like his kingly robes and his crown are going. And then Hammer gets up and he goes, "I have quite a headache." He says, "Doctor, am I in your quarters?" And then you find out that nobody remembers anything.
I thought that was the weakest part of the episode, by the way. Why not?
What?
Why not tease Leon later about it? Hey, you have a great singing voice. I remember from when we were all transformed into fairy tale characters. I didn't really see the need to erase their memories of that.
No, I mean it's a very common sci-fi.
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes it easier later not to have to refer back
exactly.
to that.
Oh, nobody remembers. But I was surprised that Hemmer didn't remember.
Yeah.
It is surprising because he
like
was good. Presumably, the entity while they were like, "Oh, you mean it?" But fortunately, they left the memories with Mbenga, so he could remember his daughter, know that she was safe.
Right.
And then number one comes in and talks with him, and he explains. She's like, "You're the only one who." He's like, "Nobody remembers," and he's like, "I'm the only one who knows." She's, well, that must be one hell of a story. He's like, "It is," and it begins like all stories with "Once upon a time." Oh,
yes,
yeah,
very touching.
It was a very touching episode. I loved it, and for a variety of reasons. One, because they introduced this dilemma of his sick daughter in the second episode.
Right.
No, the third. It was the third episode.
Third episode, right?
And it was wonderful to see that get resolved in a way. Like I wasn't sure, like in normal network TV that would have like come back maybe once a season.
Yeah.
But because they're doing 10 episodes and they have to keep things tighter, they did get a resolution, and it's a happy ending. Maybe not the ending we wanted, but it's still a happy ending.
Yeah.
Yeah, because at first it seemed, well, that was a quick resolution to this particular storyline. But as Leo points out, in these short TV seasons, you risk drawing it out if you don't take care of it at the right point. So I think it was a good call.
Much like in on the show The Good Place, for fans of that show, when you find out the big twist at the end of the first season, in a normal network TV show, they would have kept that going for years before they did that.
Oh, sure. Oh, yeah.
Bombshell. But they did it, and they found a way to reinvent the show every season by switching up the circumstances.
Yeah.
Which I loved. And I think that sometimes TV shows hold on to things that it's too precious. We can't do this. We're going to save this for sweeps. We're going to save it for next season.
Right.
But as a friend of mine who's a musician, he was doing his first album, and invites another musician gave memories, which is like, don't save any of your songs. Use all your best songs because you don't know if you're going to get another album.
Right.
So what are you saving them for? Give them your best and trust that you'll also come up with new best songs.
Yeah.
So,
Excellent point.
Yeah. Well, guys, we're coming towards the end of the hour. Not that it stops us from running over every week, but do you have any other general notes for the episode?
I have. Thank you. Yeah, I have one. One thing I haven't seen this compared to. Now, I've been kind of a proponent lately of thinking, okay, we're seeing some good reinterpretations of some classic Trek tropes. Say that fast 3 times. Yeah. I'm kind of ready for some unique concepts now. Although I guess you can make the argument that most episodes harken back to something that's happened before. But having said that, what I haven't seen this compared to a lot is the DS9 episode Our Man Bashir, where the characters actually were given the personalities of the holodeck characters. That to me is very similar. But that was fun. That was a romp. There was some jeopardy there in terms of the holodeck blowing up, but it didn't have the emotional payoff of this one. So if they're going to go down a familiar path, I'm glad when they take a fork to one side that adds a new dimension to it. So I think that was really successful here.
Yeah.
I agree. This episode also reminded me of the episode Metamorphosis from the original series with the first appearance of Zephram Cochrane, more of a haircut actor, as I like to say. One of these guys with the, he's got the short.
John Corbett, I believe, is his name. Yeah.
Yeah, and the idea of the guardian that kept him alive, and this entity reminded me a little bit about that.
Yeah, that's an interesting comparison. I hadn't thought of that actually.
Yeah,
it was just like was like, oh yeah, there's, you know, uh, what seems like something that might be a threat, but is actually benign, you know, or at least loving. Um, so just it felt like they took a little bit, like they added a little bit, like let's add a little metamorphosis into the
Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of hope my Nexus theory has some water, because it would be nice to, after all these years, to put a
That'd
little
be
bit of a
cool.
personality on that concept instead of
Well,
just some random thing going through space. You know,
in that it's a place where all your dreams come true.
that's
Um,
exactly that's what when I saw her in the princess outfit, said, "Oh, wait a minute," that's what made me think of it.
Interesting
Yeah.
theory. Apparently, Picard's is to have a Victorian family.
Right.
Because they all those
Kirk wants
kids,
to chop wood
Yeah.
and make eggs.
it did feel like a Currier and Ives painting come to life,
Right.
you know. But and so there. But I like the fact that they are bringing things back. That there is a kind of this is something that, you know, all my love. I have such love for the original series, but very rarely did anything come back. You know,
Right.
the only two instances of things being referenced more than once was, you know, we saw Harry Mudd twice,
Right.
and Kirk's brother is mentioned in the episode with Lurch with Dr. Richard Corby,
Yeah, yeah, Corby.
when they're with the android eyes Kirk, and he was like, you know, it was you know, George Samuel Kirk. Only I call him Sam. And then we get to see a mustachioed Kirk or Shatner as his brother, Keith Jacobson. I like this episode. Very bittersweet. It was very
Great way to
bittersweet.
sum it up, Keith.
Yeah, exactly. But I think this was a good. I like this episode. We had a bit of sort of fantasy element to it, um, which I liked, and I like to see the actors getting stretched to their legs and do different things and play different versions of themselves. You know, sort of like not really mirror versions, but sort of like you get to see sort of this sniveling,
Alternate, yeah.
like, you know, is the sniveling sort of like scheming character.
Right.
Well, and revisiting some concepts, if that's the right word here, is good as long as you build on it.
Yeah, and
That's why, again, something like The Naked Now is useless, because it did nothing but just repeat itself.
yeah, that was especially like nobody was like, "Hey, didn't this happen on another Enterprise like 100 years ago?" It feels like they should be like that should be red flagged, you know. FYI, if people start acting a little wacky, you know. But this felt like it took elements from other episodes of Star Trek and sort of mixed it and made a whole new thing.
Which is often very successful, I have to say.
Oh yeah.
And like I said, a bittersweet but touching resolution to Mbenga's daughter's problem. You know, the problem of his daughter, and well, the idea is like, how does he find a way to be happy? Because his whole happiness felt like very much focused on curing his daughter. Like that was his, in addition to his duties.
Well, and now a couple of people's theories, in my look at it, about why Dr. McCoy becomes his superior officer. We had a couple people speculate on this program that the reason for that was because he gets in trouble for this keeping his daughter in there. But now that she's gone, it seems a lot less likely, in my mind, that it would ever come up.
Yeah, it could still bite him in the ass, you know.
I mean, it could bite him in the ass, yes.
But I'm starting to think that, and I hope this is. I think I said at the very beginning when you guys invited me to be on the sick bay episode of Trek Tonight.
Right.
I just hope it's a professional, personal choice of his.
Right.
You know.
I mean,
yeah, me too.
I'm trying not to look too far into the future. I'm just like looking forward to the next episode, and then after that, the next season.
And next episode, have you guys seen the sneak peek?
No,
not yet.
Well,
you dropped it already, huh?
No.
Yeah, they got a sneak peek on YouTube, and it's pretty obviously. It sure looks like they're going a big old stream of blood going to a hole in the wall.
Oh, okay. Wow.
So we'll
see. That will be an interesting episode to see.
So yeah, I love this episode. I thought there were a lot of wonderful touches. Like I said, there's so many great lines. And Ortega says to Pike in the beginning, was this, you know, your words could polish, you know, polish this goblet. I know I wrote it down. It was a great line. Because my mind clearly is a sieve. So, with my notes, where is it? Your words could polish the finest of apples.
Right.
Which was such a great burn.
Yeah.
You know, they had such their chemistry translates well into like a snippy, rivalry, as well as their jovial sort of like bon home on the bridge.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So
And I just like their banter. I mean, sometimes it gets a little bit outlandish. And I think when that happens, we get a look from Pike. He's like, "Come on, get serious."
yeah.
But I did like her
Only
line
two
prior to
episodes.
being transformed. That okay, leaving creepy Nebula, take 2.
Yeah.
Right. Right. Right.
As he puts out, we only have 2 episodes left,
Yeah.
which makes me. I feel much like Mbenga did towards the end of the episode. A little heartbroken. Too soon? Too soon?
Too soon. Too soon.
I told you
all
we'd
right,
feel that
guys.
way.
Joe, what do you got going on? You might want the folks to know about.
Appreciate it, Chris. Well, as always, I've got Townsel.com. That's your gateway to my books, my writings, and now my web appearances with you guys and with the others. And find me on Amazon. Check it out.
Cool. Excellent. How about you, Leo? Anything special going on?
Well, go to genesect.org if you want to read my writings. 2 full novels, bunch of short stories. I wrote a lot of short essays about my experiences doing improv in New York City, which I enjoyed. Again, much like, I don't know if Joe feels this way. Sometimes I write something like, well, I like that. Whether anybody else will is, of course.
You always write for yourself first.
Yes, you have to. Otherwise,
Yeah.
unless we start shoveling money at me, I will write for myself first. That is yet to happen. But on July 1st, if you were anywhere near Leeds, England, I have a play in the GI 60 Play Festival, which is 60-second plays. They're doing it in Leeds, England. They're also doing it a little later on the 7th and 8th of July here in New York, and they're also doing it in Houston.
Oh, that's fantastic, Leo.
So it is a 60-second play I wrote called One Thing at a Time.
Right.
It was a hard-learned lesson during the pandemic, and in these troubled times is, as much as we feel overwhelmed by everything, all you can do at the end of the day is one thing at a time.
Right.
And thank you for the honor of giving us a sneak peek some weeks ago.
Yes, I sent it to these 2 gentlemen because I was like, is this anything?
Yeah. I really enjoyed it. I really
as
did.
did I, and I think I think people are gonna love it when they see it perform.
Oh, I'm sure they
It
will.
is not being broadcast live, but it will be available for streaming later on, and
Great.
I'll put a link up once that happens.
Great.
And I'm sure the rest of them are really interesting. It is a real challenge to write something that short.
I know that well because I've done copywriting and advertising, and to get an interesting concept across in 30 seconds or 60 seconds, it's a real challenge.
It is,
or in 25 words.
Yeah,
right. Yeah.
I think my years of writing haiku have trained me in the art of brevity. Yeah, exactly.
Yes,
I also have on Twitter. I have my Trek Haiku, where I put a new Trek haiku up every day, and I've been doing that for.
Which usually make me chuckle because they usually have a humorous.
I try to put a little humor. Today was a little bittersweet in honor of the episode.
Got that.
Kind of hard to make a joke, although there were some laughs. In spite of the bittersweet, there were some solid comedy moments.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
So definitely, there was texture in the episode.
Yes.
Right. Yes.
So that is what I'm up to.
I'm going to be producing hopefully over the weekend. We'll get it done. I just recently received in the mail the Playmobil USS Enterprise playset, and which is a very expensive toy. And but I'm going to be producing an unboxing and build video of that. Hopefully, get that done over the weekend, and possibly with the assistance of my soon-to-be 8-year-old.
Oh,
My daughter Charlotte is 7, but will be turning 8 in July. So we'll at least get her review at the end once it's completed. So yeah, I'm going to start doing some of those things, especially on the YouTube channel. So check our YouTube channel for new content. I'll clearly post links on Facebook as well, but I'm going to be producing a lot of those kind of videos directly for YouTube. So I guess that's about it, guys. Great episode.
Awesome.
I really enjoyed it.
Just remind everybody, follow us on Facebook at Trek Tonight, YouTube at Trek Tonight, Twitter at Trek Tonight, and we're still waiting for fan mail from a flounder. So please, Trek Tonight 2022 at email.com, where we await your. If we start getting fan mail, we'll read them on the air and answer any questions we have.
Oh, definitely.
Congratulations, guys, on your growing viewership. Chris tells me that it's just really growing by leaps and bounds, and I can see why, because it's a great show, quality program. Thanks so much for making me a part of it when you can.
Oh, we love having you, Joe. Anytime.
Thank you for being a part of it. Yes.
We get a thumbs up from our dear buddy Craig Lubin. Thank you, Craig, and hopefully I'll get a chance to talk to you a little later on tonight. All right, gents, we're gonna kick it out of here. Have a wonderful week, folks.